Social health is our focus in October. I wanted to start this by paying a bit of attention to what social health is. If you look up social health, I wasn't actually familiar with the term. It's a way to talk about something that's a little bit different from physical or emotional health. It talks about our connections with other people and having strong social connections and not too much social anxiety, for instance, can really help in terms of our satisfaction in life. There's a lot of studies that they've done now on that. One of the things that we can look at when we look at social health is some of the influences. When we look around and see some children, and maybe you think back to when you were in school, or maybe you have other children in your life now, some children seem to be what we would call well adjusted. That may or may not be true on the inside. They have a lot of confidence. They have a sense of the world isn't perfect, but it's good enough. I have the social support at home, perhaps, or with a teacher, or maybe it's with a friend's parent. A lot of times, children will find social support in a different place than just their parents. So, when we look at some children, they have a sense of agency. That last week we were working with what is my dream for my life. Those children have a sense of, I'm worth having a dream, I'm worth having a really fulfilling life. And when we look at the developmental aspect of that, the brain, how we develop our brain and nervous system, when we have good social support or good co-regulation as a child, then we're able to develop a lot of ability to regulate ourselves. We have that neural networks for connection. Something's going on that's distressing, we're more likely to look to a person for help than we are to look to some kind of an addiction. If we did not have that experience, we have a whole different set of neural networks in our brain. We know a lot about protecting ourselves. And we also might be gravitating towards people who won't necessarily be the healthiest for us, but it might feel safer than being completely on our own. When we look at our social health, at our social networks, it's really an important component of that to understand why and what contributed to the situations that we're in now, instead of looking at it going, well, I'm very socially isolated or I'm too afraid to connect with other people. And COVID has certainly made this more difficult, the isolation we experienced the first year or two, especially. So, just to keep all of that as part of the context of what we're looking at today. We have an individual path of healing, and then I want to move into the more connected one with other people. If we start at the bottom, the step at the bottom is that we're getting to know ourselves. We get to know a whole bunch about ourselves, especially during these somatic mindfulness practices, guided inquiry. We learn how we react and why. We learn about the thoughts in our mind, our core deficiency beliefs. We learn a lot about ourselves. As we're doing that, hopefully we're starting to really open up into acceptance as well. We become willing to be more patient and compassionate with ourselves. And we develop a lot of proficiency in some of these tools. We notice, okay, I'm feeling dysregulated. I'm awash in catastrophic thinking or inner critic. I know how to come back into regulation. I'm going to do some cyclic sighing, or I'm going to give myself a hug, or whatever that might be that works best for us. And as we continue along that and come to the next step, we really notice that a lot of our stored trauma is beginning to release. We're able now, because we're able to stay in the present moment and regulate ourselves, we're able to see and be with traumatic memory in a different way and to not shame ourselves for our past experiences. We stop being so tied up in the core deficiency beliefs. And this period of time can be quite intense. It's not like in any way that we're saying that this is easy. And even though it's an internal process, we don't have to do it by ourselves. Once we get to a certain level with our own internal process, then we are able to reach out to other people with more sense of a safety. Our own nervous system becomes more resilient. We become healthier in our thinking. We have the experience of, I've reached out to someone and they were in a bad mood and they rejected me or whatever. And that's not really about me. Maybe they have a lot on their mind right now. Maybe they have a lot of things that they're worried about, or maybe they're not interested in being with me. But that doesn't mean that there's something wrong with me. we're able to reach out more and cast a wider net and risk being more authentic. And at the same time as that's happening, sometimes we're really getting dissatisfied with our old relationships. Just like when we first start to meditate or become more aware of thoughts in the mind, it feels like there's a lot going on in there. It feels like our mind can be pretty chaotic. And that can be similar dynamic here where we are reaching out more. We're working very diligently to stay in our own experience of ourselves, to not take things so personally. And it's true that other people, connecting with other people, is not 100% reliable for lots of different reasons. When we're a child, we really need to have a good enough connection. We don't know how to regulate our own nervous system, and we need regulated adults to co regulate with. And we get that with a baby or a child, even a teenager, young adult. Our brains don't fully develop until we're in our mid to late 20s, which isn't something that we used to know, but scientists do research that now. When we're a child and our adults aren't connected enough with us, we really feel abandoned. When something's similar, there's a similar kind of an energy to somebody or a situation. As an adult, we can really be activated into a lot of those feelings of abandonment. One of the things that I want to work with, and we'll get to that in a minute in the inquiry, is when we're a child, our adults, our parents do have a responsibility to take care of us and to nurture our development. And once we're an adult, it's not the responsibility of somebody else to do that. When we can become more regulated ourselves, we have more access to our adult self, then that is the way to do this, to fill in these developmental steps. Is if we didn't have optimal development when we were a child, we all go into our adult lives looking for that. And that's not something that's always necessarily healthy for us. We get angry or we turn against ourselves, but there's an inherent objectification in this. When we need something from another adult that relates to our childhood needs, we don't really see them. We want our needs to be fulfilled. Sometimes I'll say children are inherently selfish. And that's true. Children don't think about, if I have a tantrum right now, what's the effect of that going to be on my mom or dad? Unless they've been highly traumatized and are parentified, where that becomes the way that they keep themselves safe. But generally speaking, children don't even see their parents as people. They see them as people to fill their needs. And that sounds a little bit harsh. I don't mean it to be that way. That's just the part of the development of a child. When we do this as an adult to another adult, we forget that we're resourced, we forget our own strength, and we're kind of flashed back to that time. From our adult self, we can reach out to other people to have well-resourced, equal, mutual relationships with each other. And if we're really caught up in our own developmental needs and ways we should have been cared for when we were young, we tend to not have as healthy of relationships as we could have as an adult. That's something that we can work with. Let's do some inquiry around that. What do I look for from other people? Let yourself be aware right now. Let's take a moment to notice what's happening in your body as you're listening, as you're seeing those questions. Take a couple of deep breaths. Give yourself a hug or hold your own hands. Notice what it feels like right now. And let yourself be here as you're looking at these. And let's start with when you were a child. What connections did you have that were good enough? It may not have been in your family home. It might not have been there. It might have been with a teacher. It might have been with somebody else's parent. It might have been an older sibling, a friend, a librarian. Who were your connections as a child? Let them come forward for a moment. And some of those connections will still be there. Some would have been disrupted because that was the school librarian and I don't go to that school anymore. Or maybe it's a friend or a family person who's no longer with us. what do you have now that are good enough connections? There might be same people, most likely there's a lot of different people. Some of them might be the people that are here doing these practices together in this Sunday community. What are the connections that you have now that are good enough or that you could nurture? You have a sense of, I'd really like to get to know that person a little better. I feel some simpatico. I feel like there might be a connection there. And what might happen if you were to reach out? What are you looking for? Does it feel like that would be a mutual support? Sometimes we have connection with somebody, but the support really pretty much goes one way. If we have a friend who's really struggling with something, we might be supporting them more than they're supporting us. It's not necessarily that it has to be exactly equal. What is it that you're looking for, either in the connections you have now or the ones that you want to nurture? And it might be that you're looking for some consistency, that that person is regulated enough that either they will connect with you or they'll say, it's not a good time. Can we meet on Tuesday instead? But you're looking for something that's reliable where you're not anxious all the time, or where you have the sense that they really enjoy who you are and they like to spend time with you. And you could bring their face to mind. You could bring some examples of interactions that you've had with them. Now, if you were to let that settle for a moment, we're going to move into a different part of the inquiry. You might be working with the same person. You might be going back to childhood. It might be a different person. What happens inside of you when someone is not attuned to your emotional needs? This could be someone who's never attuned to you, someone who maybe at work or somebody that you can't really avoid, a neighbor or something. And they just don't seem to really have the capacity to connect with you, or maybe you have the sense that they don't like you or they don't care about you. So, what happens in you in that situation? Or maybe it's somebody who normally is pretty attuned, but now they're not. They fell in love and they don't have any time for you anymore. Let's sit with that for a couple of minutes. What happens inside of us when we're not around someone who is attuned to our needs? Or when we feel let down or disappointed? And then see if you could be very present as your adult self. You might do a couple of regulating practices, like take some longer exhales, hold your own hands, open your eyes, look around the room. Let your adult self be here. Look at this truth. It's not up to another adult to fulfill my unmet developmental needs. As a child, I needed that consistency, that care, and we still need that now. And we can be here for ourselves and not putting that burden on somebody else. We can be open to deeper connection with other people and then bring forward that in a personal way. If you think about your own adult self and that you're here for yourself, that's personal. And then bring forward somebody who maybe you can count on often, but sometimes they turn away, or someone who's a bit ambivalent. A lot of people are ambivalent in their attachment. Notice, what does that feel like in your body if you take a few deep breaths? What is the energy? It might be a realization that I need to support them right now. Even though I also need support, I might have to look somewhere else for that right now. It might be to let yourself feel disappointed or angry, or to reevaluate a relationship. And to notice if you're able to open your heart. This person has their own needs, their own unmet developmental needs, most likely, and their own needs in the moment. And could I let them be free from my disappointment around them not meeting my needs right now? There could be a lot that's coming forward. And as with any of these somatic inquiries, it's often really helpful to do a first pass and then maybe come back to it later as well. As we're getting ready to finish the inquiry for now, notice if there are one or two things that stick out for you. Maybe it was a part of the inquiry or a memory that came up where you started holding your breath. Or maybe when your heart really opened and you felt kind of warm, where you felt the support of your own adult self and some compassion and connection for your younger self. Let that come to a close for now. Tune into your body, your breath. Put your hand or hands on your heart if you want, or hold your own hands, give yourself a hug. Let yourself feel your own support.